I thought I knew my boss. I thought I could trust my wife. One hotel receipt proved I was wrong about everything. My name is Corey Martin. For 3 months, I watched my boss orchestrate the most calculated betrayal I've ever seen, using company money, business trips, and his authority to get close to my wife, Sarah. That single receipt unraveled everything: my career, my marriage, and the truth about the man I worked for. What Marcus didn't realize was that my background had trained me perfectly for this kind of investigation. For 8 years, I'd built a reputation at Meridian Financial for spotting risks and patterns no one else saw, which is exactly why Marcus chose me as the perfect mark. I'd worked my way up from junior analyst to senior risk assessor, the kind of position that required methodical attention to detail, processing loan applications, identifying fraud risks, analyzing market data. The executives trusted my assessments because I was thorough, never rushed to conclusions, always backed up my findings with solid evidence. Marcus Kellerman arrived 6 months ago as our new regional director. He was 44, had an MBA from Wharton, and came with glowing recommendations from Sterling Capital Management. What impressed the executives wasn't just his credentials, but how quickly he made it his business to learn about every employee. He attended birthday parties, asked about weekend plans, remembered personal details that seemed thoughtful at first. During coffee breaks, he'd ask about family members by name, inquire about hobbies, show interest in our lives outside work, positioning himself as the approachable executive who cared about his team's well-being. I watched him work company events, noting how he collected information, filing away details about each person's circumstances, relationships, and aspirations. The company holiday party in December was where Marcus first met Sarah properly. He'd seen her at previous events when spouses were invited, but this time he made a point of seeking her out. Sarah had been running her own freelance marketing consultancy for 3 years after leaving her position at a large advertising firm. Marcus approached her near the bar, complimented her work, asked detailed questions about her client base, her specializations, her business goals. She was flattered by his attention, his genuine interest in her professional expertise. Within days of that conversation, I noticed Marcus asking me more questions about Sarah's work, her background, her career ambitions. He framed it as friendly interest from someone who might be able to help with networking opportunities. Marcus mentioned he had connections in the marketing industry, people who might be looking for consultants with Sarah's skills. I appreciated what seemed like genuine offers to help my wife grow her business. What I didn't realize was that Marcus had already decided to target us specifically. He'd learned that Sarah and I had been married for 12 years, that we had a stable relationship, but that Sarah sometimes felt frustrated with the limitations of freelance work. She missed the resources and collaborative environment of larger organizations. Marcus had identified her professional ambitions as a vulnerability he could exploit, while my steady, predictable nature made me an ideal mark, someone who wouldn't immediately suspect ulterior motives. 2 weeks after the holiday party, Sarah mentioned running into Marcus at Bella Vista, her favorite Italian restaurant downtown. She'd been having dinner with a client when Marcus approached her table, apologizing for the interruption, explaining he was there for a business dinner with potential investors. He asked about her project, complimented her client's smart choice in hiring her, offered to introduce her to other executives who might need marketing support. Sarah thought it was a fortunate coincidence, a networking opportunity that could lead to bigger contracts. But Marcus didn't just stop at compliments. He turned genuine help into something far more calculated. He'd researched Sarah's preferences through her social media posts, her business website, her LinkedIn profile. He knew which restaurants she frequented, which professional events she attended, which industry publications she read. He'd positioned himself as a mentor figure, someone with the connections and influence to advance her career. His offers seemed genuine because they were backed by real knowledge of her work and concrete suggestions for growth opportunities. Around the same time, Marcus began making subtle criticisms of my work. Nothing major, just small comments about deadlines being too conservative, about my analysis lacking innovation, about my approach being outdated for the modern financial landscape. These remarks were always delivered privately, framed as constructive feedback from someone who wanted to see me succeed, but they created doubt about my performance, uncertainty about my job security, stress that I carried home without realizing where it originated. I started noticing Marcus's unusual interest in my personal schedule. When I mentioned taking time off for Sarah's birthday, he asked detailed questions about our plans. When I talked about weekend activities, he wanted to know specific locations, times, details that seemed excessive for casual conversation. Marcus remembered everything I told him about Sarah's schedule, her preferences, her upcoming projects, information that felt too precise for someone who'd only met her a few times. The strange thing was how natural Marcus made these conversations feel. He had a gift for extracting information without seeming intrusive. His questions felt like genuine interest from a boss who cared about work-life balance. But Marcus's knowledge of our personal lives extended beyond what I'd shared with him. He knew about Sarah's sister in Portland, her concerns about expanding her business, her frustration with inconsistent client payments, details I'd never mentioned at work. I was beginning to understand that Marcus Kellerman wasn't just gathering information, he was preparing to use it. Marcus needed legitimate reasons to spend time with Sarah away from the office, so he invented a consulting project that would require her marketing expertise. 3 weeks after their restaurant encounter, he called Sarah directly explaining that Meridian had acquired a portfolio of distressed commercial properties that needed rebranding and repositioning in the market. The project would require someone with her specific background in real estate, marketing, someone who understood both the financial sector and property development. She lit up, seeing it as the break she'd dreamed of, unaware it was a trap. The consulting contract Marcus presented looked completely professional: standard terms, competitive rates, a 3-month timeline with potential for extension. He explained that the project would require site visits to properties in Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver, meetings with potential investors, and collaboration with the acquisition team. Sarah would be working directly with him as the project lead, which meant regular communication and travel coordination. She signed the contract that same week, not knowing Marcus had created the entire project using company resources and authority he didn't actually possess. Marcus began scheduling business trips to Portland every 2 weeks, claiming he needed to inspect properties, meet with local real estate agents, and assess market conditions for the acquisition portfolio. What he didn't mention in his trip reports was that Sarah's sister lived in Portland, or that he'd researched Sarah's family connections through her social media profiles. The timing wasn't coincidental. Marcus knew Sarah visited her sister monthly. He'd studied her travel patterns, creating opportunities for accidental encounters and professional meetings. Marcus manipulated my work schedule with surgical precision. He'd assigned me to conduct site inspections in Chicago. Just as Sarah was planning her Portland visits, he'd send me to Boston for client meetings that coincidentally lasted 3 days, exactly when Marcus had scheduled his own Portland business trips. He claimed these assignments were urgent, time-sensitive opportunities that required my immediate attention. My expertise in risk assessment was supposedly crucial for these deals. I felt honored that Marcus trusted me with important assignments, not realizing he was removing me from the equation so he could pursue my wife. Little did Marcus know every one of those site visit requests would later appear in my monthly risk report. His psychological manipulation of Sarah was subtle but effective. Marcus positioned himself as the successful mentor who truly understood her professional potential, unlike her husband, who worked in the unglamorous world of risk assessment. Marcus spoke Sarah's language, discussed market trends, creative strategies, brand positioning concepts that made her feel intellectually stimulated. He'd make casual comments about how talented people sometimes felt, underappreciated in their current situations, how the right opportunities could transform someone's entire career trajectory. Marcus disguised every personal expense as legitimate business costs, using company credit cards for everything. The hotel receipt I'd found was filed under property inspection accommodation. Dinner receipts were categorized as investor relations. Rental car charges appeared as transportation to inspection sites. Marcus had access to multiple company credit cards. As regional director, he could approve his own expenses up to $10,000 per month without additional oversight. He'd learned our expense reporting system well enough to know exactly how to categorize personal spending as business costs. His access to company systems gave Marcus unprecedented insight into my personal schedule. He could review my calendar through the HR portal, see my vacation requests, read my performance reviews, access my emergency contact information including Sarah's phone number and email address. Marcus knew when I'd be out of town before I did. He could plan his approaches to Sarah around my availability, ensuring maximum privacy for their interactions. Marcus timed his contact with Sarah perfectly. He'd call when she was struggling with difficult clients, offer support. When she was stressed about irregular income, reach out with new project ideas. When she was feeling frustrated with the limitations of freelance work. He'd studied her patterns well enough to know exactly when she'd be most receptive to his offers of professional advancement and personal attention. The credit card statements crossed my desk as part of my monthly risk assessment duties. I processed expense reports for unusual spending patterns, flagged transactions that seemed inconsistent with stated business purposes. It was routine work until I started recognizing patterns in Marcus's spending expensive dinners on dates that matched Sarah's Portland visits, hotel charges for extended stays in cities where we had no active business. Marcus was using company funds to finance his pursuit of my wife. I started documenting every suspicious charge, cross-referencing dates with Sarah's travel schedule, with my own assignments with Marcus's claimed business activities. A picture began forming of systematic financial fraud designed to fund a calculated seduction campaign. Marcus had used his position, his authority, and company resources to orchestrate an elaborate betrayal. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd targeted someone whose job was finding exactly these kinds of hidden patterns, and I was starting to notice he knew far more about Sarah's daily routine than any casual acquaintance should. My risk assessment training kicked in as I started tracking Marcus's digital footprint across his LinkedIn, Instagram, and even company phone lines. The pattern was unmistakable. When Sarah posted about completing a challenging project at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, Marcus would like the post within minutes, even though he should have been nowhere near social media for work purposes. His comments weren't casual either. They were calculated, intimate responses like, "Your strategic thinking really shows in this campaign, Sarah." Or, "Clients are lucky to have someone with your creative vision language that felt more personal than what you'd expect from a colleague's boss." Phone records told an even more disturbing story. Marcus made 47 calls to Sarah's business line during January, alone, each call lasting between 15 and 35 minutes, far longer than typical business discussions. His call log showed contacts with her at 8 p.m. on weekdays during weekends from hotel rooms in Portland when he was supposedly conducting property inspections. And dozens more confirmed his stalking campaign across every communication channel he could access. As a risk assessor, spotting these hidden patterns was my specialty, and he made them too obvious. I documented every inconsistency in Marcus's expense reports, creating spreadsheets that tracked his claimed business purposes against actual spending patterns. Restaurant charges at establishments that had no business connection to Meridian Hotel, stays in cities where we had no active clients, rental car expenses for vehicles upgraded far beyond company policy. Marcus had spent $18,000 in 3 months on what he claimed were investor relations and property inspections, but the locations and timing suggested something entirely different. I found Marcus's business card in Sarah's purse while looking for her insurance card after a minor car accident. The card was different from his standard company cards. This one had his personal cell phone number, handwritten on the back, along with a note that read, "For private consultation anytime." The handwriting was careful, deliberate, the kind of personal touch that suggested intimacy, not professional courtesy. When I asked Sarah about it, she said Marcus had given it to her in case she needed to reach him outside normal business hours for the consulting project. But the way she hesitated before answering told me she understood the implications. My access to company financial systems revealed the full scope of Marcus's manipulation. He'd established separate expense categories for his fraudulent spending, client entertainment property, research, investor relations. Each category had different approval thresholds and reporting requirements. Marcus exploited these differences to hide his true spending patterns from casual review, splitting single expenses across multiple categories, making them harder to detect during routine audits. A $2,000 weekend in Portland would appear as 3 separate legitimate business expenses instead of one suspicious personal trip. The credit card statement showed purchases that had nothing to do with business. Lingerie from Victoria's Secret charged to client entertainment wine from exclusive Portland vineyards, categorized as investor gifts jewelry, from Tiffany listed as employee recognition awards. Marcus was financing an elaborate seduction campaign using company funds, building a relationship with my wife through systematic financial fraud that totaled over $30,000 in 3 months. I created a detailed timeline using Excel spreadsheets, calendar entries, expense reports, and phone records. Marcus's Portland business trips coincided perfectly with Sarah's visits to her sister. Every time Sarah mentioned traveling to see family, Marcus would submit a trip request within 24 hours, claiming urgent property inspections in the same city. The pattern held for 3 months straight, 12 separate occasions where Marcus and Sarah were in Portland simultaneously, while I was conveniently assigned to out-of-state projects that required my immediate attention. Company security footage added another layer of evidence. Marcus would arrive early, stay late, using his executive access to review employee files, including mine. He'd spent hours reading my performance reviews, my personal information, my emergency contacts, printing Sarah's business contact information from my HR file, accessing my calendar to coordinate his trips with my absence times. Marcus had turned company resources into tools for stalking my family. The systematic nature of Marcus's approach became undeniable as I compiled evidence across multiple sources. Financial records, communication logs, travel patterns, social media activity, physical evidence, every piece pointed to the same conclusion. Marcus Kellerman had identified my marriage as a target and was using every resource at his disposal to destroy it for his personal gratification. His plan was comprehensive, calculated, and had been running for months while I remained completely unaware of the threat to my family. The evidence was overwhelming, but I couldn't act on emotion alone. This required the same methodical approach I used for risk assessment at work, analyzing potential outcomes, preparing for every possible response. I pored over every scenario, refining one plan I knew he'd fall into. Marcus would likely deny everything, first claim misunderstanding, then shift to damage control mode. He'd probably try to flip the narrative, paint himself as the victim of misinterpretation or false accusations. His MBA background meant he'd know exactly which corporate buzzwords to use: professional development, mentorship, networking opportunities. He'd have rehearsed explanations for every suspicious interaction. The decision to involve Sarah came after weighing all options. I could confront Marcus directly, but that would give him time to destroy evidence or create alternative explanations. I could report to HR immediately, but without Sarah's testimony, it would be my word against a regional director's. I needed Sarah to understand what had been happening, to see Marcus's manipulation for what it really was. Her reaction would tell me everything about how deep his influence had reached. I waited until Saturday morning when Sarah was relaxed, having coffee on our back porch. I spread the documentation across the outdoor table: expense reports, credit card statements, phone logs, social media screenshots. The timeline I'd created showing Marcus's Portland trips matching her sister visits. Sarah's face changed as she processed the evidence. Her coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to anger. "He knew exactly when I'd be in Portland," she said, staring at the travel records. "Every single time I mentioned visiting Lisa, he'd suddenly have business there. I thought it was coincidence." Her voice got quieter as she continued reading. "These restaurant charges, Corey. He took me to dinner at Le Bernardin, said it was client entertainment. I thought the company was paying." She looked up at me with something between embarrassment and fury. "He spent $700 on one dinner, said I deserved to be treated like the professional I was." Sarah's hands shook as she read through Marcus's expense reports, seeing how he'd categorized their dinners, their drinks, their meetings as legitimate business costs. He made me feel special, Corey, like someone finally recognized my potential. He'd say things about how underappreciated talented people can feel, how the right opportunities could change everything. She paused, looking at the phone logs showing daily calls between them. I started looking forward to his calls. He made me feel heard, understood in ways I hadn't felt in years. The admission that followed hit harder than I'd expected. Sarah told me Marcus had been increasingly inappropriate over the past month, his comments becoming more personal, his invitations extending beyond business hours. He'd started touching her arm during conversations, standing closer than necessary, making remarks about her appearance that went beyond professional compliments. He said I was wasted in freelance work, that someone with my intelligence and beauty should be running marketing departments at major corporations. I rationalized it as confidence-building networking advice from someone who could actually help my career. Sarah agreed to help gather irrefutable evidence. She was angry at being manipulated, but more than that, she was furious about how Marcus had used her professional insecurities against her. We spent the rest of Saturday planning our approach. We needed Marcus to make explicit offers, concrete proposals that would eliminate any possibility of claiming misunderstanding or innocent intentions. The recording had to capture him clearly, stating quid pro quo arrangements, trading career advancement for personal favors. The strategy required Sarah to contact Marcus, suggesting she was ready to take their relationship beyond professional boundaries. She'd arrange a private meeting, claim she'd been thinking about his suggestions, about her untapped potential. She'd express frustration with her current situation, openness to new opportunities that Marcus had been hinting at for weeks. The goal was getting him to articulate exactly what he wanted from her, in exchange for career advancement. Sarah called Marcus on Sunday evening, her voice carefully modulated to sound receptive, but not desperate. I've been thinking about our conversation last week about maximizing my potential in the right environment. She paused, letting him fill the silence. Maybe we should meet privately to discuss some of the opportunities you mentioned. I think I'm ready to explore options I wasn't comfortable with before. Marcus took the bait immediately, suggesting dinner at his hotel suite Tuesday evening while I was supposedly traveling to Dallas for client meetings. At that moment, every piece was in place. Marcus was about to seal his own fate. I prepared comprehensive documentation packages for HR, legal counsel, and senior executives, every expense report, every communication record, every piece of evidence showing Marcus's systematic abuse of authority, financial fraud, and predatory behavior toward my wife. I contacted Janet Morrison, our head of human resources, scheduling a meeting for Wednesday morning. I also reached out to Tom Bradley, our outside employment counsel, explaining the situation, requesting guidance on proper procedures for reporting executive misconduct. Tuesday evening arrived with Sarah maintaining perfect composure. She'd rehearsed her approach, practiced responding to different scenarios. Marcus had prepared the suite with wine, expensive takeout from Portland's most exclusive restaurant. He'd spent another $800 in company funds creating what he thought would be the perfect seduction setting. Candles, dimmed lights, soft music playing from his laptop. The scene looked like something from a romance movie, except it was funded by corporate fraud and built on months of calculated manipulation. I used a hidden mic and waited in the connecting suite, heart pounding. Marcus had no idea that his months of planning were about to collapse, that his victim had become the bait in a trap designed to expose every aspect of his predatory behavior. The man who'd used his authority, company resources, and psychological manipulation to pursue my wife was minutes away from destroying his own career with his own words. The audio quality was perfect as Marcus poured wine and started talking about Sarah's untapped potential. You know, Sarah, I've been watching your work closely, and I think you're ready for something bigger than freelance consulting. His voice carried that practiced charm he'd perfected over months of manipulation. I have connections at major corporations, people who could offer you positions that would change your entire career trajectory. Sarah played her part perfectly, expressing interest in the opportunities he'd mentioned, asking what kind of positions he had in mind. Marcus leaned closer, his intentions becoming unmistakable. Well, these are executive-level positions, Sarah, the kind that require a special relationship with the person making recommendations. He paused, letting the implication sink in. I could personally guarantee you a marketing director position at Sterling Capital, my former company. But that level of advocacy requires a deeper understanding between us. Sarah asked what he meant by deeper understanding, her voice, carefully maintaining curiosity without commitment. Marcus took another drink and moved to the couch beside her. I think you know what I mean, Sarah. You're an intelligent, beautiful woman, and I'm in a position to open doors that have been closed to you. His hand touched her arm as he continued. All it would take is your willingness to explore a more personal partnership with me, someone who truly appreciates your talents in ways your husband never could. I watched Sarah's face tighten. She knew exactly what she had to do. The recording captured every word as Marcus explicitly offered career advancement in exchange for a sexual relationship, his voice confident as if he'd made this proposition successfully before. That was my cue. I opened the connecting door and stepped into the suite carrying 3 manila folders filled with documentation. Marcus froze mid-sentence, his wine glass suspended halfway to his lips, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and pure panic. Hello, Marcus, I said calmly, setting the folders on the coffee table. $32,000 in dinners with her, all on company cards. Sarah stood and moved away from the couch as Marcus scrambled to his feet, his smooth executive composure completely shattered. Corey, what are you doing here? This is a private business meeting. His voice cracked on the word business, betraying his awareness of what I'd just witnessed. His self-assurance evaporated in seconds. I opened the first folder and spread expense reports across the coffee table. 18 dinners at restaurants you claimed were investor meetings, but the only person you met was my wife. Marcus started to protest, but I continued. Hotel charges for upgraded suites in Portland, categorized as property inspection accommodation, but we don't own any properties in Portland. His face went white as I laid out credit card statements showing purchases at Victoria's Secret Tiffany jewelry stores, wine retailers, all charged to company accounts as business expenses. Marcus tried damage control, claiming everything was legitimate business, that I was misunderstanding the nature of client entertainment. Sarah is a valuable consultant. Corey, the company benefits from maintaining good relationships with our contractors. He gestured towards Sarah, who stood behind me now. These were professional development opportunities, networking events that could benefit Meridian's expansion into marketing services. His explanations became more desperate as I opened the second folder, revealing phone logs showing daily calls to Sarah's personal number, calls lasting 40 minutes, made from his office during business hours. The third folder contained social media screenshots showing Marcus's calculated engagement with Sarah's posts, his research into her family background, his contact with her sister in Portland, building a network of legitimacy around their fake relationship. You called Lisa Martinez 14 times. Marcus asking about Sarah's visit schedule, her emotional state, her marriage satisfaction. I pulled out printed emails showing Marcus's communications with Sarah's business clients, introducing himself as her business partner, discussing opportunities that didn't exist. You used company resources to stalk my family. Marcus, you used your position to manipulate my wife, and you used corporate credit cards to fund the entire operation. Marcus's denial shifted to anger, then to pleading. Corey, you don't understand the pressure I'm under to expand our client base. Sarah has real talent. I was trying to help her career. He looked at Sarah desperately. Tell him, Sarah. Tell him how our professional relationship could benefit everyone involved. Sarah stepped forward, her voice cold. Our professional relationship, Marcus. You mean the fake consulting project you invented to get close to me, the trips you scheduled to coincide with my personal travel, the dinners you paid for with company money while propositioning me for sex in exchange for career advancement. I pulled out my phone and played back the recording from 20 minutes earlier, Marcus's voice clear and unmistakable as he offered Sarah executive positions in exchange for personal favors. I could personally guarantee you a marketing director position at Sterling Capital, but that level of advocacy requires a deeper understanding between us. His own words destroyed any remaining pretense of professional conduct. Marcus slumped into the chair, his face gray, as he realized the full scope of his exposure. Wednesday morning came early, as I presented the complete evidence package to Janet Morrison and HR Tom Bradley, our employment counsel, joined by phone, as I detailed Marcus's systematic abuse of authority, financial fraud, and predatory behavior. Toward my wife, Janet's face grew more serious with each document as the legal implications became clear. Tom confirmed that Marcus's actions constituted multiple violations of company policy, federal harassment laws, and potentially criminal expense fraud. We need to involve senior executives immediately. Corey, this goes beyond HR. This is a legal matter that could expose the company to significant liability. The executive conference room filled quickly as word spread through upper management. Marcus was escorted from the building by security within 2 hours. His access to company systems terminated. His company credit cards canceled, his office sealed pending investigation. What none of us realized was that this was just the beginning. The internal investigation revealed Marcus's systematic pattern across multiple companies. HR found he'd used the exact same playbook at 2 previous firms targeting married employees' spouses through fabricated business opportunities, company-funded manipulation, and strategic work schedule coordination. Patricia Wells discovered Marcus had left Sterling Capital Management under suspicious circumstances after allegations involving a senior analyst's wife. The official record showed voluntary resignation, but former colleagues confirmed he'd been quietly forced out, using identical tactics down to the expense report categorizations and psychological manipulation techniques. Within a week, they asked me to step into his role, proof that digging out the truth can reshape your career. CEO Robert Morrison explained during the brief board meeting that my investigative work had saved the company from potential lawsuits, federal charges, and industry-wide reputation damage. Your analytical skills and integrity are exactly what we need in regional leadership, Corey, he said, sliding the contract across the conference table. We need someone who understands risk assessment at every level, including the risks posed by our own executives. The salary increase was substantial, but more important was the authority to implement oversight procedures that would prevent future abuse. He faced criminal fraud, federal harassment, and employment violations, enough potential prison time to end his career. The district attorney's office pursued the $32,000 in falsified expense reports, while federal authorities opened their own investigation after discovering Marcus had used company resources to conduct stalking operations across state lines. Each charge carried significant penalties, but combined, they represented the complete destruction of his professional future. Sarah's civil lawsuit against both Marcus and Meridian Financial was handled by Patricia Hendricks, one of Portland's most respected employment attorneys. The evidence package I'd compiled made the case straightforward. Marcus had used his position of authority to manipulate Sarah professionally, while using company funds to pursue her personally. The company's liability stemmed from inadequate oversight of executive expenses and failure to implement proper safeguards against abuse of authority. The settlement reached 6 figures. Sarah used the money to launch her own marketing firm with the financial security to choose clients based on merit rather than desperation. My new position allowed me to implement comprehensive oversight procedures for executive expenses, travel, and employee interactions. Every expense over $500 now required secondary approval, with detailed business justification. Travel reports had to include specific meeting attendees with contact information for verification. Executive access to employee personal information was limited and monitored through automated systems. I created protocols for reporting suspicious behavior and mandatory training for all management personnel on appropriate professional boundaries. The experience strengthened my marriage with Sarah in ways I hadn't expected. Working together to expose Marcus's manipulation required complete honesty about our vulnerabilities, our insecurities, our individual needs that had made us susceptible to his tactics. Sarah appreciated my methodical approach to gathering evidence, my refusal to make accusations without proof, my commitment to protecting our relationship while seeking justice. We developed new communication patterns discussing work stress, professional frustrations, personal concerns before they could be exploited by others. Marcus's attempts to find new employment became increasingly desperate. Within 6 months, his reputation had spread throughout the financial services industry. Employment screening companies had documented his pattern of misconduct, making him unemployable in any executive capacity. His LinkedIn profile showed increasingly junior positions, application processes that ended abruptly after background checks revealed his history. Marcus went from regional director to unemployed to working retail sales at an electronics store. His fall from executive privilege to minimum wage service work was complete and permanent. The ripple effects extended beyond Meridian as other financial services companies began reviewing their own executive oversight procedures. The industry publication, Financial Services Weekly, ran a feature article about executive abuse of authority, using Marcus's case as a cautionary tale for inadequate expense monitoring and employee protection protocols. Several companies reached out requesting copies of the oversight procedures at implemented industry conferences began including sessions on preventing workplace manipulation and recognizing predatory behavior among executives. My role expanded to include training programs for employees at Meridian and other companies teaching people to recognize manipulation tactics, document suspicious behavior, report concerns, through proper channels without fear of retaliation. The training sessions were well attended because Marcus's story had become known throughout the industry, a concrete example of how executive authority could be abused and how systematic documentation could expose even the most calculated predators. The satisfaction of seeing Marcus face consequences wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. For the systematic way he'd abused his position, manipulated vulnerable people, and used company resources to fund his predatory behavior. Marcus had calculated that his victims would remain silent, that the complexity of his schemes would provide plausible deniability, that his executive status would protect him from serious consequences. His sophisticated manipulation crumbled under basic investigative techniques, applied by someone who understood how to document patterns and build cases. But what he'd truly miscalculated was something far more fundamental about the people he chose to target. Marcus Kellerman relied on his victims staying silent and isolated like most predators do. He calculated that shame and confusion would prevent people from speaking up, that the complexity of his schemes would provide enough doubt to avoid consequences. What he didn't anticipate was systematic documentation, turning his own methods against him. If you notice suspicious behavior at work, trust your instincts, but document everything. Dates, times, specific conversations, expense patterns, travel schedules. Create evidence that speaks louder than denials. Don't wait for proof, start gathering it now before it's too late. I lost trust in my boss, but I safeguarded my marriage. You can protect what matters most too. If something feels off at work, document it. Trust your instincts and share this story to warn others. If you've ever faced betrayal, drop a comment below.